It's easy to get deja vu with all the excitement around Caleb Williams, feeling somewhat similar to how we felt about Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky. But there really is something different about this QB and this Chicago Bears team that sets them up to break the cycle of failed quarterbacks in Chicago.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. On the show today, we take a deep dive into what makes Caleb Williams and this year's quarterback draft pick different than the last couple of the times we've been through this same cycle with Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky, where you get excited about the young quarterback, you think he's going to be the future of the franchise who changes everything and unlocks the potential and solves the quarterback problem, and then starts off on the wrong foot. Things go poorly from there. Coaches fired, coaching staff change, general manager change in some cases, and then new regime wants their new quarterback and we start all over again. But Caleb Williams can break that cycle because there's some specific things about him and this pick and this situation that were not present for Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields that makes it easier to believe that this time is going to be different. We'll look at sort of the draft themselves. We'll look at the situation he's coming into and also what these quarterbacks were like coming out of college to kind of give us a better sense of what sets Caleb Williams apart. But first and foremost, the obvious thing shouldn't be just glanced over or overlooked, that Caleb Williams is the number one overall pick in the draft. Not just the first quarterback off the board, because Mitch Trubisky was also the first quarterback off the board in his draft, but the number one player in the draft, that every player was available, and this was clearly the best option most importantly, in what was also a very strong quarterback class, where there was a lot of competition and a lot of back and forth on who could be the top quarterback in this draft. In the draft where you say, in any other year, Drake May is the number one overall pick, or in any other year, Jaden Daniels is the number one overall pick, but not in this year, because Caleb Williams was head and shoulders better than those players. This was a strong quarterback class, and this guy was clearly the best option among a strong quarterback class. And certainly we could see multiple quarterbacks from this class pan out and be effective NFL starters. We had a record for number of quarterbacks taken in the first round. They just one after another was popping off the board. This was a quarterback desperate group. Plenty of teams inquired with the Bears about going up to number one, but never really got anywhere with those discussions. But this was the guy that everybody wanted. Neither Mitch Trubisky nor Justin Fields was the guy that everybody wanted. Trubisky was the first quarterback off the board. He was number 2 and not number 3. But he was far from the consensus. Everyone in the NFL thinks that's the best QB in the draft. I think among Bears fans, there was not even a consensus that Mitch Trubisky was the best QB in the draft. There's not data on this, but in my memory, I think back of more Bears fans preferring Deshaun Watson at that time. I don't think you heard a lot of Bears fans preferring Patrick Mahomes specifically, but even up until draft day, there was kind of a question of which one of these quarterbacks is going to be the first one off the board? And how early is a quarterback going to be off the board? Maybe we kind of had a feeling that maybe the Bears might take one at 3, where they started in that draft, but you didn't know exactly who it was going to be or in what order or how long these QBs would last. A lot of questions about that quarterback class. It was perceived as a quote-unquote bad quarterback class. Then you move ahead to Justin Fields in 2021, and that's another one where it's okay, Justin Fields comes off the board as the 4th quarterback taken. Still 11th overall, but clearly 10 teams chose to pass on Justin Fields, including 3 that chose to take other quarterbacks. Not the consensus top guy, not a guy that every team liked. Teams were willing to take worse quarterbacks, as it turned out. I think we can all agree Trey Lance has been worse, and Zach Wilson's been pretty much consistently worse as well before Justin Fields, but he was no sure thing. He was no consensus pick. Everyone seemed to give the Bears a lot of credit for that pick. There was a lot of praise for the Bears landing Justin Fields at 11, but he was still the 4th quarterback in the draft class, right? There's something to be said about this was not a obvious decision that everyone says, oh, of course, you got to take him when he's there, because a bunch of other teams that probably could have used him ended up passing on him in those moments. So again, like the Bears took what they could at 11, but it wasn't like this easy, obvious choice compared to Caleb Williams, who was like unquestionably not only the best quarterback in this draft, but like the best quarterback prospect in college football for the last 2 or 3 years. It felt like he has been building up to this moment over time. You know, obviously the Heisman Trophy winner in 2022. Like he carries this cachet, this track record, this proven commodity that everybody wanted coming in. Justin Fields had shades of that, but obviously never a Heisman winner. I think he finished, was it 3rd in the Heisman voting that year, 2nd or 3rd? I don't remember how it ended up playing out, but was a finalist, but didn't win the Heisman Trophy award, and was never really like the best quarterback in college football at any point in his college career. He was always one of the best, but like Trevor Lawrence was pretty clearly the best quarterback in that draft, the best quarterback in college football, and Justin Fields was second fiddle. I mean, he's much closer to wherever, Drake May or whatever in this year's draft class you might consider in terms of the quarterback ranking, where it's like, yeah, he's up there for sure, but never was like the bona fide best guy. And some people might say Jaden Daniels was the best guy this past season, but I mean, over the course of Caleb Williams' career, he was the guy. Jaden Daniels had a better 2023, but when you combine the multi-years of Caleb Williams production, he was clearly sought after as the best quarterback, and his draft status as the number 1 overall pick certainly reflects that. And then, of course, Mitch Trubisky, a 1-year starter at North Carolina, came on hot at the end, out of nowhere, after being a backup through most of his college career, and had a very strong season. But no one was really like, oh, wow, Mitch Trubisky was this dominant quarterback who led the country and was a Heisman guy. Like, not at all. I mean, Watson was probably closer at that point, and we were already kind of, you had other quarterbacks coming out the next season, questions about, if Baker Mayfield was going to be that guy as he kind of elevated at Oklahoma there. Like, there were other quarterbacks in those conversations already that weren't, that made the competition for Mitch Trubisky that much more difficult. So, like, Caleb Williams just comes in from such a better place in terms of the quarterback discussion, right? You can look back in 2021 and the 2021 draft and go like, should the Bears have taken Mitch Trubisky there? Could they have taken a different player, or however, whatever position they want to address there? Like, you can look back and try and second guess that move if you want. You can certainly look back in 2017 and try and second guess, well, like, was that the best decision at the time? Maybe not, maybe it wasn't, but like Caleb was the obvious pick. No one is ever going to look back and go, the Bears should have known that they should have taken Drake May instead, or that the Bears should have known they should have taken Jaden Daniels. Like, no one is second guessing that, oh man, what are the Bears doing? Like, they had to take Caleb Williams. This was the only choice they had if they were going to stick with the number 1 overall pick, was to take Caleb Williams. There was no second guessing that decision. There's no looking back and saying, man, why did the Bears choose him? You just can't question it, because he is the choice. Whether he works out or not, you'll look back and say, well, they had to take him and see if it would work. That's just what they had to do, and no one's going to look back and say, what did Ryan Poles, what was he thinking in that moment? Because he was thinking the same thing everyone else was thinking. They all wanted the number 1 overall pick. They all wanted Caleb Williams. So he comes in out of the draft as the all-around better prospect compared to either Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields, the only number 1 overall pick quarterback the Chicago Bears have ever taken. That alone makes him a lot different coming here than either of those previous or any of the previous quarterback experiences. But what also makes this pick different is the Chicago Bears team he's coming into. So we'll take a closer look at his supporting cast compared to Mitch Trubisky's and Justin Fields, and also where the coaching staff plays into this, and also what they had to deal with in college. We'll get to a little bit later on, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go, the hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. You can take it on the go with you wherever you want, play all day, every day, on your own time, on your phone. And it's such a good time because it's both collaborative and competitive. You can play with your friends and work together on timed tournaments and really build up each other's Monopoly boards. And then the more that you win together, the more prizes you unlock and get new pieces and travel across hundreds of different boards in Monopoly Go that always keep things fresh and interesting. But you can also play against them and smash their buildings and heist their bank vaults and do some damage on their board to get ahead of them on the overall leaderboard. And they keep it new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges that have their own unique mini games. It keeps things fresh for you at all times. There's always new timed events that help you win big prizes, massive multipliers, rent frenzies, you name it. There's a lot of different ways you can play and enjoy Monopoly Go. So discover what's always new and fun in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Perhaps most importantly, the difference between what set Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky up for failure that is set up to set Caleb Williams up for more success is what they're coming into as Chicago Bears quarterbacks. It does not guarantee that Caleb Williams will be successful, but it's one of the key reasons you can point to and say, this is why it's going to be different this time with this quarterback compared to the last two quarterbacks that you also fell in love with, but then were once again disappointed by. Because those two quarterbacks came into very, very little as NFL quarterbacks. Very little in terms of pass catching talent, very little in terms of offensive line talent, very little in terms of coaching quality. And that all got them on the wrong foot to start. And then for both quarterbacks, for both Justin and Mitch, it did get better over time. And then it got worse in some ways. But they never really, I don't know if you could say they never really recovered from that start, but you always wonder, had Mitch had a better start, had Justin had a better start, would they have developed better, faster, more consistently, more linearly, and not had the type of regression that then led the Bears to move on to the next quarterback? With Caleb, he's going to have that start right away. And when you look at the names, even just on paper, because we haven't seen this Bears offense come together just yet. We haven't seen how they play together. It's not going to be perfect for Caleb year one. Even with the great weapons and all that stuff, there's going to be bumps along the way, growing pains, guys getting used to each other, etc. I mean, it's a rookie quarterback too. There's going to be mistakes. But just on paper, it's such a drastic difference. Mitch Trubisky had a backfield with Jordan Howard in it. Pretty good. All three of these quarterbacks have had pretty good running backs. We'll give them credit for that. But Mitch Trubisky had Jordan Howard, and that was it. I mean, receivers were, Kendall Wright, Josh Bellamy, I think, were their two leading receivers, but they had Marcus Wheaton was signed that offseason. They had Kevin White was trying to be a big-time receiver for them was the plan. That didn't obviously work out there. And then at tight end, they had an injured Zach Miller and free agent signing Deion Sims. Nothing anywhere close to a reliable set of skill players to help a young quarterback adjust at the NFL level. Then you go to Justin Fields, who gets a better set than what Mitch Trubisky had, but still some limitations there, right? Again, good running back. David Montgomery in that backfield was a 1,000-yard guy, had a really strong season. Darnell Mooney, as a rookie receiver, had 1,000 yards. This was his second season, but still it was a 1,000-yard receiver whenever the timing it was there. He had a big year that first year with Justin Fields and also Andy Dalton and Nick Foles that year, but Darnell Mooney had a strong year. He was their leading receiver. They still had Allen Robinson, but he was a little bit winding down in terms of the productivity and the consistency there at receiver. And so he wasn't as good as the name recognition might suggest that year, but he was, I guess, a name, someone who you felt like you could rely on somewhat. And then after him, it was, Damiere Byrd, Marquise Goodwin at receiver. And they had Cole Kmet as a young tight end in that offense, developing and growing. And okay, he's pretty good as far as a pass catching option there, but not much besides Montgomery, Mooney, and Kmet. A little bit of Robinson, but that was about it. Not ideal, and a lot of Justin's year one issues came from the Bears just not preparing him. And we'll get to coaching here in a second, but personnel-wise, it wasn't as barren, as desperate as what Mitch Trubisky had. But then you go into year two with Justin Fields, Ryan Poles cleans out the cupboard, and the receiving core is just as bad, if not almost felt like worse in year two. So it took a couple of years for things to get there for Justin Fields, where at least Mitch Trubisky got Allen Robinson right after that, and they did make a concerted effort to build around him and give him better weapons. He had a bad first year. Justin had a couple of years with not a lot of help on the offense. Caleb Williams comes in, and we've seen the investment this offseason. DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Obviously, DJ Moore trade last year, but then trade for Keenan Allen this year. Draft Rome Odunze in the first round, so 3 dynamic elite weapons at the wide receiver position. You still have Cole Kmet and now Gerald Everett added at tight end, more players in the backfield. Like, he's got pretty much, I was going to say everything he needs, but like pretty much he has more than you could ask or hope for. Obviously, you can always be better on the offensive line. You can always have more depth here and there, whatever, but like, you can't ask for anything better than what Caleb Williams has right now. You can't expect a rookie quarterback to come into much better than that in terms of the players on the field around him. And so that right away puts him at a big advantage. But I also think Caleb Williams comes in with at least somewhat of a coaching advantage. We don't know exactly. We assume Shane Waldron will be good, and all the staff they've invested in around the quarterback position and that on that offense. There's a lot of reason to like these guys, but I do still want to actually see how they do in Chicago before I say, oh, the Bears have a great coaching staff for Caleb Williams. Like, the Bears have a promising, encouraging coaching staff for Caleb Williams, but we still do have to see it. I'm not just going to give them all the full credit until we actually see them do it. But it certainly already feels a lot better than what Mitch Trubisky came into with, under John Fox and Dowell Loggins as the offensive coordinator, a guy who's been consistently, mediocre and kind of failed upwards for a while and bounced around the league a little bit, but is now a offensive coordinator at South Carolina. And 2 years ago, he was a tight ends coach at Arkansas. Like, he's not a good NFL offensive coordinator who is putting these players in the best position to be successful. Then Justin Fields comes into Matt Nagy, and Bill Lazor at least is also a more experienced NFL offensive coordinator who had worked with a variety of quarterbacks and experiences and systems. And there was something to like about Bill Lazor, but the whole operation of the offensive coaching staff there, leaving Justin Fields as the number 2 and number 3 quarterback throughout OTA's training camp in the preseason. So he never got to work with the starters, never got to get used to the starting receivers, the starting offensive line. And then 3 weeks into the season, or I guess was it 2 weeks where he came in the second half, but made his first start 3 weeks in the season against the Cleveland Browns with very little preparation, very little time having worked with those players, and was just poorly managed as a developmental asset on your offense. It's not to say that Bill Lazor was the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL, because I don't think it was quite that. It just, they handled him so poorly and made so many mistakes with how they were trying to set him up that the operation was terrible. Even if maybe you could make a decent argument on behalf of the coordinator himself, who's now a senior offensive assistant with the Houston Texans, I might add, but was out of the league for a season in between there. But not great, and certainly not well executed for Justin Fields. But Caleb has a whole cast of strong coaching staff names, guys with experience who have worked with quarterbacks that you can at least feel encouraged about. Obviously, what Shane Waldron did with Geno Smith and to a lesser extent, for a game Drew Lock in Seattle is very encouraging for a guy who's been able to get more out of lesser quarterbacks or quarterbacks that aren't perceived as dominant. You get Thomas Brown as the passing game coordinator, who's been an NFL offensive coordinator before, albeit just for a year in Carolina, but you feel like he brings a little bit more experience than you might typically have underneath an offensive coordinator. He's a guy who we expect to get an offensive coordinator job again at some point. And then your quarterback's coach, Kerry Joseph, being a former quarterback himself, having worked with this offensive coordinator. I'm not here to say he's a great QB coach. Again, we'll see. But at least I think there's a lot to like about this coaching staff, feeling like a nice mix of valuable experience, but also new ideas and modern, innovative NFL football that neither Mitch nor Justin had coming into Chicago. On top of all of the players on the field with those quarterbacks and with those coaches to all work together. Sometimes it was hard to tell how good some of those previous offensive coordinators were when they also didn't have a ton of weapons to work with. But now Caleb has both. There's certainly no excuse for this Bears offensive coaching staff to come up short or not succeed with everything they've put around them in terms of the quarterback and the players around them. So that's where it's just man, Caleb is coming into such a better position, top to bottom, organizationally, coaching staff, roster. Everything is really set up better for him than it ever was in Chicago for Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields. And then you look at them coming out of the draft as prospects, right? Obviously, we talked already about Caleb being, the consensus top guy and being the best quarterback in college football, but specifically both, kind of from a scouting reports perspective, the strengths and weaknesses and how that translates to the NFL, but then also what they went through in college, you really feel like there's a lot more to trust in Caleb Williams' evaluation than more of the question marks that came with Mitch Trubisky, and to a lesser extent, Justin Fields. But we'll kind of compare them as far as their college situations and what they were as prospects coming in that can help you feel even more confident about Caleb Williams next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. It is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So you place a $5 bet on anything on FanDuel. Playoff games, or you could bet on Caleb Williams' passing yards this season, over-under. You could bet on Rome Odunze's receiving yards. There's odds for Offensive Rookie of the Year and so much more. Any $5 bet. If your bet wins, not only do you get the winnings from that $5 bet, but then you're getting an extra $150 in bonus bets added into your account that you can bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. So to get your $150 in bonus bucks, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. When you look at just the quarterback prospects of Mitch Trubisky, Justin Fields, and Caleb Williams, you can really see that Caleb Williams is in a little bit of a league of his own. And I think there's a separation between Mitch, and then there's Justin, and then there's another break, and then there's Caleb. Like, I don't think Justin and Mitch are in the exact same category there. I think Mitch had a lot of red flags and a lot of questions. Justin had fewer red flags and fewer questions. And Caleb, I think, has even fewer than that once you kind of look more closely at these guys. Like, I think we all kind of know the Mitch Trubisky story, right? 1-year player out of North Carolina, flashed a lot, made a bunch of great plays, but clearly there was an inexperience factor there. As far as reading defenses and reading the field and knowing what defenses were throwing at him and being able to adjust and like operate an NFL offense, like maybe a little bit raw, a little bit over his skis when he had to start, was it 4 or 5 games into his rookie season, right? Like that was, we kind of knew the book on Mitch Trubisky. Like he had a big arm and could make some big throws and made some great plays in college, but there needed to be a lot of development there, and we didn't see as much of it as we needed to in college. That was a little bit more of an easier sell. But even with someone like Justin Fields, right? Justin Fields also was accurate, consistent, productive, experienced in college in a lot of the same ways as Caleb is. And we've heard comparisons between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams coming out. But I think, one of the key differences there is they both probably held the ball a little bit too long in college. They probably, could have standed to throw the ball away a little bit more, although I think Caleb was better at that than Justin was. I think Justin was also a little bit quicker to scramble, and Caleb's a little bit more inclined to stay in the pocket and wait the play out before throwing it as opposed to before scrambling it. But more so, we could see some of the processing speed questions about Justin Fields in college. And not really processing speed per se, but when we saw him fail towards the end here in Chicago, right, where he's going through his progression, but he's not pulling the trigger, right? Like he can read the field well. It's not a processing problem per se, but it's he's not delivering it the way he needs to and not necessarily trusting what he sees. Like those kinds of questions started with Justin in college. And we knew that in college, Fields was not a quick thrower, was not a quick game, timing underneath anticipation rhythm type of thrower. We knew he was a vertical guy, more like that Cam Newton style of load up and throw downfield, but not as good on the quick game and the underneath stuff. We knew that about Justin, and he didn't get enough better in that area. He improved in that area, but didn't make enough strides in that area. But Caleb can do that all. Like Caleb is a better, faster processor. He reacts more quickly than Fields. He does get through his progressions a little bit more quickly. He has that kind of quick game timing and anticipation to snap, turn, get the ball out on time with the placement where it needs to be. Like some of those things that Fields did not do well, Caleb Williams does. Not to say that Caleb Williams doesn't have flaws. Like he does the hero ball stuff too much and forces the ball sometimes when he's trying to make a play for his team. Like he's not a perfect quarterback prospect who's never going to fail. But I think the things that he does are a little bit more easily coached out of him, and more so he has fewer flaws than Justin. He doesn't have some of the same areas that Justin struggled with and never developed at in his NFL career. So that's where it's easier to trust Caleb. And I also think when you look back at college, Caleb Williams did all that production with a lot less strong of a supporting cast in college than what either Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields had. It's easy to I feel like I'll give on the front end that when you look at Caleb Williams' 2023 supporting cast compared to his 2022 supporting cast, his cast was better 2 years ago, but I'm going to talk about the 2023 guys, which is that nitpicking. I mean, it's their most recent year in college for all three of these guys is what I'm looking at specifically, their last season in college, but technically Caleb did have better weapons in his Heisman year. I'm not trying to give biased information here or leave out certain stuff to make a better argument here. But you look at the receivers that these quarterbacks were throwing to. Mitch Trubisky had a couple of fourth-round picks in Ryan Switzer and Mac Hollins at North Carolina. One of his other receivers, Austin Proehl, was a seventh-round pick. His running back, TJ Logan, was a fifth-round pick. All drafted skill players around him there. Justin Fields, obviously. They had 4 first-round wide receivers at Ohio State. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, obviously. Jackson Smith and Jigba was young that year. And they also had Jamison Williams, who then transferred to Alabama and was a first-round pick by the Lions. They had 4 first-round wide receivers in that Ohio State receiving core, plus their running back Trey Sermon was a third-round pick a couple years ago. Justin Fields was throwing to NFL playmakers with an NFL backfield and an NFL offensive line. Mitch Trubisky was throwing to, not elite NFL playmakers, but NFL guys, with NFL backs in the backfield. Caleb Williams this past season at USC, I mean, again, he had Jordan Addison was there a couple years ago. USC has had good players before, but this season, his wide receivers, Brendan Rice, drafted in the 7th round. Taj Washington goes undrafted. His lead running back, Marshawn Lloyd, was a third-round pick to the Green Bay Packers. Okay, he had a good running back, no doubt. But the offensive line was not good. None of their other receivers came out, so none of them have been able to get drafted yet. Their number 2 running back, Austin Jones, went undrafted. They only had Marshawn Lloyd drafted the 3rd round, Brendan Rice is the 7th. Those are his only skill players that have been worth a draft pick from this past season so far. Maybe one of the ones next year will develop into somebody better, and it'll look like a better supporting cast, but just clearly on paper, Fields, first-round picks he's throwing to. Mitch Trubisky has a bunch of fourth-round picks he's throwing to. Caleb's got some undrafted free agents and 7th-round guys in his offense. And they all had decent running backs, but generally speaking, Caleb Williams did a lot more with a lot less. Justin had a great supporting cast in college, and that was one of the questions. It's okay, he played with NFL playmakers across the board at Ohio State in a great situation all the time. How's he going to do in the NFL when things aren't so great? With Caleb, he's played in some not-so-great situations in college. So if things ever go wrong in Chicago or somebody gets hurt or whatever and the supporting cast is lesser, he's been through that before. Whereas Justin had to adjust a little bit to not having first-round picks across the board at wide receiver. Caleb Williams has that now in Chicago. Whatever the NFL equivalent of Olave and Wilson at Ohio State is, that's Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Rome Odunze for sure. The Bears are giving that to Caleb now in the NFL, and that's great for his development. But I feel I'd rather have the quarterback who elevated the level of play of players around him in college and then give him an easier situation in the NFL, as opposed to Justin, who certainly got a lot of help from the players around him in college and comes to a more difficult situation in the NFL and maybe has a little trouble elevating the play of those players. And that's where, again, it feels easier to trust that Caleb Williams' translation to the NFL will go more smoothly, because it's not just a dominating supporting cast that made life easy for him all the time in college. He had to do so much of that work. Whereas Justin was still great at Ohio State, but it helps a lot to have Olave and Wilson and Trey Sermon and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jamison Williams. That makes all the difference in the world to be successful in college, and then things got more difficult for him in the NFL. So I just feel across the board, the coaching staff, the players in college, the scouting report, the draft prognostication, across the board, there's all these different reasons why you can trust in the idea that Caleb Williams will go differently than how it went with Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. That's no guarantee that he's a Hall of Famer or the greatest quarterback in Bears history it's not a guarantee that he doesn't bust. But I think it's a lot easier to look at this year's quarterback pick and say, okay, am I just falling for the same trap of Bears draft a quarterback early and I put on the orange and navy goggles and look past all the red flags because I want to love him? Or is this actually different this time around? And to me, it's pretty clearly actually different this time around. And I feel I'm ready to trust that, okay, different process should mean different results. It's not same process, same results. It's now, different attempt, different approach to quarterback, different kind of quarterback, different quarterback team that he's coming into. I can expect different results. Different results doesn't mean perfect results, but it should mean different results than what we got with Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky. I'd love to hear if you think things are different with Caleb Williams, or what you think is different about Caleb Williams coming to Chicago now compared to Justin and Mitch coming to Chicago before. Let us know in the comments here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, or you can tweet us at Locked On Bears, or you can post on the Locked On Bears Facebook page. However you do it, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, you should check out the national 24/7 Locked On Sports Today streaming channel. It is on YouTube and also now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories of the day with our local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So find Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream, now available on YouTube or the free Fire TV channels app. Coming back throughout the rest of the week, we're gonna look at the Bears' undrafted free agent class with rookie minicamp coming up this weekend. We're going to look at the Bears' schedule release that's expected later this week. We're going to compare Caleb Williams to some of the other recent number one overall pick quarterbacks and find some lessons to learn from that. So a lot of goodies coming your way, and we'll make sure that every single day we give you another opportunity to bear down.